Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Now, when I logged in, the update needed to be downloaded, 22 meg update. We now have new cards in the shop, so we have this exclamation point. There was actually even a couple of little slide-in pop-up messages saying the Duel Pass is the second season of the Duel Pass is available, and uh, and a new selection pack is available, which is what we've been waiting for, being maxed out on gems. We will need to start just very quickly with a spectate because, well, we don't have to do a spectate right now. We can do that later. We just have to do it before noon because that's about the time everything resets. And I could have logged in certainly yesterday and had a special live stream. I was even definitely thinking about that, and I just got busy playing Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which I'm still playing it. Although, in all fairness, I did watch a speedrun of the first half of the original Mirror's Edge game, and in almost every way, the original Mirror's Edge game is better. So here we have a note here. So we have Ruler's Mask as an additional pack. We have Beyond Speed as an additional pack. So we could fairly easily buy probably 50. Maybe we should go a little conservative and do like 40 card packs for each of the expansion. It will certainly come down to just what else is available, because if there's a whole bunch of other things that you can buy with gems, it might be worth it considering that. It doesn't seem like the Duel Pass is going to change much, and maintenance happened and came and went. Kind of feels like they should take down those notifications. We should have a full understanding of just how much gems are here. There's easily 400 or 500 extra gems just in the gift box. Alright, so let's look at this duel pass. 72 days it expires. It's seemingly going to give you the same 60 levels or so. I guess it's 100 levels. You get to level 100 and you get this mate. If you didn't get the pass at all, you would stop getting rewards at level 50. And this, it's somewhat questionable what the value of crafting points are. They still have yet to decide to change the CP crafting points to something better as a name, but whatever. It's funny, it drops you to the shop. Now this is interesting. It was 600 gems originally. Now they have shifted it, and perhaps that's because they've given a little bit more time to this. Although I'm not sure. Like, if it was 60 days before for the original Duel Pass, and now it's 72 days, and it was 600 gems, you still get 800 gems back as long as you play. So the only way you really get screwed by a Duel Pass is if you were to spend the gems now, or spend real money for the gems now, and then get bored with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and not play all the way to the end of the Duel Pass. So you're pretty safe in getting this. What I'd really like to see them fix, more than anything though, is stop popping up the summary of the Duel Pass once we get to level 100, because that was fairly annoying for the last 30 days or so. It definitely felt like I was seeing it tell me that I'd already finished the Duel Pass. We have yet another solo story that I need to do at some point, and I'll make a special episode around that. Let's check out the shop now. So here's your new selection pass. Here's your new selection pass. There could very easily be secret packs that unlock. As far as structured decks, they haven't replaced any of those, so we kind of would want, maybe even 1800 gems if a new one of these comes. As far as other collectibles, nothing new has been released. And as far as bundled deals, nothing new has been released. So it potentially could be a mistake to go too deep into these structured packs. And so we'll have to keep an eye out for this. We may find that opening 20 or 30 of these packs is good enough, because honestly, I'm not sure if I even opened 100 packs of these selection packs, there's a real high guarantee that you would get 3 copies of each of these ultra rare cards. Almost certainly, even in 10 or 20 packs, going to get all of the normal cards and the rare cards, and even most of the super rare cards at least once or twice. But the ultra rares are just so rare that your odds just seem very low. So we'll start with the first 10, and we won't be quick about it. There's no reason not to somewhat enjoy the experience. Plus, we need to kind of get a general idea of when we stop seeing the new. The other thing we need to check is the Master Duel packs, because the Master Duel packs, if the total number of cards available in the Master Duel packs has increased from about 6,000 to say 7,000 or 8,000, then we know actually new cards have been added. Otherwise, this may very well just be a selection pack of cards that were already in the game, and this is just an opportunity to potentially succeed. It feels like this animation sequence has been changed now. When you swipe over, anything that's special, anything that's gonna be a foil, it's still kind of ridiculous. These cards do have foil versions, but it's no more ridiculous than any other game, collectible card game out there. Like, ideally you would want this to be new cards, that just brand new cards added to the game, changing up the meta, giving people some different possibilities of decks to play. There we go now. So it's a different experience to do a secret pack, and oddly I feel like I got 2 secret keys from 1 card, which seems weird, because the secret packs give you 4 Master Duel cards and then 4 selection decks, and so they're probably a pretty bad offering of all the offerings, but they might be all you can really play with or deal with. We're starting to see cards, second copies of cards, because if we open 20-30 packs of the selection packs and we've already got 3 copies of everything, there's really no reason to open the selection packs anymore, and the secret packs may be your only good bet, because the Master Duel decks are obviously the worst bet. That is literally here's 8 cards out of a pool of 6,000 with no curation whatsoever. It seems like the rate to get foils may be going up. Alright. So, you go here. After opening 10 packs, you can see, starting at the rares, we have at least one of almost every rare. So 10 really isn't where it's at. And it probably doesn't benefit you to go and check out like these secret packs at the moment. Like, you can see I don't have a ton of these, but also there really isn't a ton of these cards either. These secret packs really are not too far off from a structured deck where it is just enough cards to build one deck. Like, these secret packs highlight that the actual themes of cards are fairly small in number, and that was true for like Magic the Gathering also. 6, 8, 30 seems like this is the same number of cards as before. So it does, yeah. In Magic the Gathering also, if there was something specifically built around the theme or very special sets of cards, there's usually less than 20 cards that really were under that same visual theme or that same naming convention. And then there would be other cards certainly that synergize fairly well but weren't obviously thought up at the same time. We now may start to see very little, and again, 2 secret keys there. The secret keys are also timed in a horrible way to force you to spend extra money when you're already spending extra money. It would make sense to actually get secret keys just by winning in ranked more than from opening card packs, because at least then you would force the player who hadn't even thought about going into the shop to go and check out the shop. But yeah, we can see even now we're starting to stop seeing that new indicator. So I think I'm gonna lean towards 30 packs. We'll have plenty of time to come back and get more if we decide it's so needed. And having as diverse of a collection of cards is the most ideal situation, in my opinion. I want to have potentially one of all 6,000 cards over having 3 copies of any specific cards. There's no new pack opening animations with this expansion. And as far as I've heard, I'm pretty much assuming that there's not really anything new else that's happening, unless the solo mission is supposed to synergize with these new selection packs, which maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I didn't even check that. The normal and rare festival ended. I was able to play off screen and get all of the rewards there, so that worked fairly well. Now we have 3 secret packs. Right. Now, let's see. If we click here and see this, we leave this screen, which is fine, really. oddly, you don't get that free pack, that free draw, when you find a new secret pack this way. You only get free draws if you craft a card and then get a secret pack that way and find a new secret pack for the first time. Whereas I think there may very well not be that many new secret packs even in existence. As it is, there may be less than 20 that I have not yet found. So we'll once again just have to wait. On this point, we have a decent collection of at least one copy of the ultra rares, but there's still a few we don't have. There's still a few super rares we don't have, and we are getting to a point where we're getting 5, 4, 7 copies of the rares. Like, it definitely feels like 30 packs is about as much as you can do. Of course, there's another danger here. If you don't get an ultra rare pack or a ultra rare card in any of the packs when you do a 10 pack, then it gives you a discount at buying the next 10 pack, which logically it would be worth it to take that in almost every scenario, but that is an unexpected experience, and that is a very sleazy, greedy thing to do, to say, oh, you didn't win on this gambling blind box loot box, let's give you a discount so you buy more blind box loot boxes. It's the equivalent of getting a free drink after you've lost $400 at a casino playing the slot machines or something. Well, it's not quite the equivalent to that. There we go. Our first pull with no new cards at all. On top of this pack opening, though, we also have a ton of the legacy packs, which are weird because they give you just 2 cards instead of 8. But it seems like the legacy packs give you 2 cards that you're guaranteed to not have, and I have over 100 of those that I need to open now that we've gotten all these cards. I guess the way they really get screwed here would be if they came out with some other things to purchase in, say, a week or two, and I spend all of the crystals now. But that would really just kind of spit in the face of the fact that Konami, of all companies, has done a fairly good job of supporting this economy and giving away gems for playing and doing the festival. Like, they're shockingly not being too greedy around a system that could be incredibly greedy if they wanted it to be. Well, I definitely have 3 copies of that card now. I probably have about 7 copies of these cards. One of the things, though, I will say that it sucks is inevitably I will turn these extra cards into crafting points for super rares, but I can't use the same crafting points to make rares. It really should be like one whole pool of crafting points, dust, whatever. Like, that would ideally be how I would like to see it play out, is that I could destroy potentially a whole bunch of normal extra cards and make one ultra rare extra card, and they keep it separate. And it almost makes sense to do that, but it's definitely not anything I've ever seen in any other game to do that. Yeah. And see, at this point, even though we don't have this, we don't have this, we don't have this, we don't have that and that, we don't have that, we don't have that, we don't have that, we don't have that, we have like 9 rare copies here, 6 copies here, 9 here. It just stops really being too logical to pull cards from that selection pack anymore. It would almost make more sense to do a master pack, just because the odds of you getting something new is higher. But master pack is not really the direction to go at the moment. So now Ruler's Mark. We already have a couple of these cards, but we can see a significant selection of these cards we don't have. And I imagine we will once again just open 30 packs, and that feels like the right number. Now in this 10 pack, none of the packs were labeled with that ultra rare glowing hue, but you can see there's an ultra rare in this anyways. The systems are awkward to say the least, as far as how everything can potentially get upgraded from a regular version to a full version, or how a rare card can be upgraded to a super rare or ultra rare. These are all new except for that card. So even in our first pack, we're seeing duplicates. I can tell you, I kind of don't know what the vast majority of these cards do. But I can tell you something like Manju of the 10,000 Hands is a card that I'm fairly familiar with. And it's a card that is particularly old. So we know that not all of these cards are cards that would have been released, say, in the past couple of years. This is probably somewhere around second, third season of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime series, the first series of the anime series with Yugi Yamamoto. So it is a fairly old card. I can't help but wonder if part of the reason why Master Duel is not being so greedy, knowing that Konami's behind it, is because Konami has had decades of selling these actual Yu-Gi-Oh cards to collectors and people, and this isn't effectively the second or third bite at the apple to sell the same cards to the same people. This is probably closer to the 7th or 8th bite at the apple selling these cards. And even in digital forms, there's been many Game Boy, DS, I don't know if the Nintendo Switch got Duel Links. Duel Links was the slightly odd mobile phone game before this that didn't quite play like the old, like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is expected to play. And frankly, half the Game Boy games did not quite play the way they were expected to play. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Konami has just realized they've made as much money as they can, and they can't convince the same Yu-Gi-Oh fans to dig any deeper into their pockets, since they've already spent so much money. And I imagine that there's also probably a thought pattern that Yu-Gi-Oh is a somewhat distant third to Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, particularly in the West. And I imagine competition in Japan and the East as far as collectible card games is very high, because there's a lot of games that are Japanese only. So I wouldn't be surprised if Yu-Gi-Oh is very popular, but competition keeps them from thinking that they just have a monopoly on the hearts and minds of the card players. Let's see. How many of these cards? This would be an awful deck, secret deck to open. So this one is definitely out of contention. Yeah. I don't even know if it makes sense. Like the odd capping of how many crystals you can have down to like 10,000 does not put you in a really great position to say, okay, I have 10,000 extra packs, extra gems. Let me open 10 packs of each of these secret packs. And you kind of know that the secret packs are coming back, so you can easily unlock them again. In fact, you almost certainly will easily unlock them again, because what you'll do eventually is you'll hit a point where there's no selection packs worth purchasing and the Master Duel packs won't be worth owning. You'll take a crafting point, you'll use those crafting points, not just one, but a whole bunch of them, to craft some ultra rare like this, or just even some super rare. I think it has to be a super rare, ultra rare to get you a secret pack. You craft whatever card you actually want. When you craft that card you actually want, that's then going to unlock a secret pack that's probably going to be full of cards that synergize very nicely with the card you just crafted. And that's about the only time that it really makes sense for secret packs to exist, is the point a player who is not familiar with all 6,000 of the cards and who really is in a direction to more cards to play with that one card. Because when you're working at this scale, 3 ultra rare packs, like, it isn't just a matter of a single cards. You're not working with single cards, you're working with series of cards, chains of cards, things that have to synergize or have to feel connected. Even when they're creating the cards, it almost certainly is the case now that if there is a Yu-Gi-Oh cartoon still being made, or a Yu-Gi-Oh manga still being made, it's almost certainly that some writer somewhere has a theme and a deck in mind, and that theme then leads to the creation of 15 or 16 cards. And that's true for like Magic the Gathering also. Like, there's whole narratives in the internal Bibles, even if those narratives are fairly rough and never actually exposed to the public. And you really don't have to do that for any other kind of game. There's some like narrative around the characters in a game like Overwatch, I'm sure, but you mostly write that once and it's fairly generic. You don't have to make 16 new Overwatch champions every couple of months. Of course, it is also a mistake of their own making. 11 stars here. So I guess at this rate, you can only have 12 or 13 stars across the entirety of a card before you'd have to scale things down. If instead of having flat images in a collectible card game, you had 3D models like the Overwatch characters, then it wouldn't be, you would put so much effort into any individual image that you would really want to make a big deal about it. And particularly in digital game format. That makes a lot more sense. And so if there were 3D models, for instance, of the Dark Magician, and you'd started with a 3D model with the Dark Magician, there probably would be a dozen different variants on that 3D model of the Dark Magician instead of the maybe 3 or 4 different variants that have been made in static flat image formats. I'll also say some of these cards, even when you kind of start to zoom in on them, until you can really look at the full image, it's just so visually busy. It's kind of hard to see what you're looking at. This looks like some kind of robot moth with a bird creature on top of it, which might exactly be what it is. And if I may indulge myself again and talk about my favorite lewd gacha game on cell phones, Destiny Child, they use the live 2D animation style to make 2D images that kind of shimmer and wave back and forth so that they have motions, and it makes it feel like the character is a lot more alive. And they make custom animations for the attacks of every single character. And because of that, and because the game in itself just emphasizes every single card, quote unquote, every single character be a character that you actually care about and think about, there is not a lot of trash or things that you would just ignore or forget about as far as the characters and cards. And they very often will have a character that is, say, a fire type, and then they'll release a different variant, a different outfit for the same character that is, say, a water type, or an earth type, or an air type, or a light type, or dark type. So it is possible that there could be 5 different variants of the same character, which is not something I've seen in any other kind of collectible gacha game, and at a certain level this is a gacha game. Okay, did I open 30 packs already? I guess it doesn't really even matter that. The question to ask, is it worth it to open one more pack of 10? I'm gonna lean towards yes on this. We have yet to see like five copies of things. Just getting even a couple copies of that might be very useful. So one more 10 pack. Notice we did not get a secret pack this time. Yeah, we probably have already opened 10 packs. In all fairness, it would be a nightmare for them to potentially try and create live 2D images of each of these characters. It would be starting over from scratch, whereas right now all they're doing is scanning images of old cards. There would be a way to do it, certainly, but it would only be something that works in a digital space. It wouldn't work for physical cards, obviously. And you would have to just say there's going to be a dividing line and all future cards would have this kind of animations, and a selection of old cards might get upgraded to it, but you really wouldn't try to do it for every kind of character or every kind of card. A lot of cards just show weapons or ships or like groups of things. It would be fairly hard to use Live 2D to animate just like this little person here. You could do this person in the lightning, and that might work a little bit, but all the background would still be incredibly static. It would also be fairly hard to try and animate this entire group of people with Live 2D, whereas something like this would probably work fairly well. There's that old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, an animation is often worth several thousand pictures, or several hundred pictures. Like, and Live 2D is not the only option. Certainly they could just have animated GIFs as images. Or they could even go with full-on 3D model animations. We're finding super rares, which is nice, but you're also seeing that a lot of these are redundant. But you can, for the vast majority of cards, you can have 3 copies of any card in your deck, and you probably want 3 copies of any good cards in your deck. So it's not terrible to get extras. Although visually, since the vast majority of cards are just not going to be played anyways, there is a slight argument towards the OCD gotta catch 'em all mentality of just wanting to own one of each card so that you can look at the art. Although, actually, unlike the last game I played, Shadowverse, I don't believe the cards are actually faded out if you don't own them. We should check that out. Because if I can just look at a card that I don't own, that alleviates a lot of that desire to actually need to own each card. I mean, it changes it from being, oh, I just want to look at the art, down to, I want to collect them all for bragging rights. So, let's see. Like, we don't own this card, and you can see it's faded out here, but when you click here, it's fully exposed. So there really isn't a need to go in that direction. And I'm getting the same keys over and over again, so like one of these obviously we wouldn't do. We could potentially do one 10-pack of the remaining ones, but I'm not sure even that makes the most sense. Let's cash in all of our extra 30 items, and that gives us 4,475. Alright. There's not a lot to be shown here still. So you have a situation here where I could get, of at least 6 of these, I could get 4 packs, 4 10-packs. And arguably 4 10-packs might not be worth it. Let's just go with this though. We want to spend this gold, and we may have just been screwed there. So we may end up having to buy a second group of 10 packs here. Okay, So these are the pickup cards at the end. These 4 are of the cards that were being selected. These others are just any card in the entire Master Duel 6,000 pool. So we were lucky that those were all new, but you are in a weird position to say the least. It effectively is going to take twice as many cards to get 3 copies of all the pickup cards. And now we've unlocked another secret pack, which creates a problem. 3 of these cards were not new, and only 3 of these cards are new. You oddly are in a position where these secret packs are just ever so slightly better than buying Master Duel packs. But if you get to the point where you're desperately opening Master Duel packs, you're probably overspending on cards or just doing some strategy that is really crazy. Now all of a sudden we're going to end up unlocking more packs. And this is usually how the secret packs go, is that you end up with a whole bunch of secret packs, unlocking more secret packs, unlocking more secret packs. And what needs to happen here is you need to get these keys and be able to save the keys for later. And potentially extend the 24-hour timeline for a key. So if the keys were currency, and it says you have 60 keys, use the key now to discover a secret pack, or use a key to extend a secret pack, that would be much nicer. If this is 5 new expansions, 5 new secret packs, obviously I don't have enough gems. It also doesn't make any sense at all to not buy in groups of 10, because then you have no guarantee of ultra rares, and you definitely need those ultra rares as much as possible. Yep. So I got 7 keys there, but oddly only 4 secret packs or expanded. So some of these were just refreshed too. Only 2 of them are actually even new. Yeah. And this one here seems like a pack that I have very little of those cards. So let's do this. And after this, assuming I get an ultra rare, I think I'm going to stop. I think 2,000 gems or thereabout is the bare minimum you want to sit on. The reasoning being, if I do find a secret pack some other way and need to open a pack of 10 for 1,000 gems, I want to always have an extra 1,000 gems ready to go. That of course paints a very narrow window, considering how the game caps out at 10,000 gems, and I want to have a minimum of 2,000. That is something that Konami needs to address. It would make a lot more sense for the game to cap out at 100,000 gems. It would also make a lot of sense for it to be fairly infinite. Nothing really stops somebody from buying a 10,000 gems, spending the 10,000 gems, and then buying another 10,000 gems, and doing that to their heart's desire, just spending a ridiculous amount of money. if you wanted to be a whale at this game, I'm sure they're more than willing to let you be a whale. So it does feel like it is kind of just an artificial limitation. It wouldn't probably be a terrible idea if there was some kind of legal limitation as far as just how much real world currency you can convert into digital currency at a time in such a way that this might lead to a new secret pack. But yeah, if there was some kind of like anti-money laundering law that said you could only have $500 of real world currency inside of a game unspent on non-refundable items, it might be somewhat beneficial to companies and just to stop people from potentially filling up their wallets for no good reason. Now we have 3 new card packs. Yeah. But none of these particularly feel like they're gonna give me a free pack or anything like that. Certainly, like, this would be a great one to get. There's literally only 2 of these cards. So could I get this and risk it? Probably can. But this will have to be our last choice. Plus we have a whole bunch of legacy card packs to open, so it makes sense to mostly spend all of our gems now getting cards before that way we have a smaller pool of new cards to be handed from the legacy cards, assuming it always gives us new cards, which it may not. And this has just been, and is going to be a full hour of card pack opening. The good news here is I'm not particularly insomniatic, if that's a word. I'm not particularly sleepy today, and there isn't a ridiculous amount of video game news today, so we should be able to handle all of that at the end of the stream after all of this. This might be the killer, certainly. On a certain level, it kind of doesn't even matter if you find a secret pack and then don't spend any money on it, because getting a card that is in a secret pack tells you exactly what card to craft to open that secret pack again. And you don't even really need that information, because the better way to do it is to simply look online. Almost certainly every secret pack and every card in every secret pack is listed already online. So you could find a fairly cheap super rare to craft to get into a secret pack, to then open up 10 packs of a secret pack to get more cards in that same theme. And I would have to assume, even though I don't know if this is true, that this game has been out long enough now that there is a guide out there that has been made that specifically tells you, craft this one card, it'll get you to a secret pack, open all this secret pack as much as possible, and then that'll get you to a deck that is high in the meta as far as ranked play, and then you can play ranked play and win more, and by winning more you will then get more rewards to get more cards, and you'll be starting off on the right foot as far as playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Yeah. That worked out very nicely. We got ultra rares galore. We've got secret packs galore. Yep. Seems like there might be a hard limitation. Like, it's very questionable that I literally just got 10 secret pack keys and yet I only unlocked 2 new cards. And I just don't have the crystals to really jump down and open this, even though it would be a good one to get. Seems like they may have programmed this in such a way that you always renew with at least 50% of the keys you get. Or it might just be that the secret packs are actually more of a mesh that reinforce on each other. So now I have 23 hours left to potentially spend cards on any of these. And I just don't think I want to risk it, even though the risk is probably very low. Do we want to gamble? I guess is the question, because this one would almost certainly be the one to gamble on. Nope, that's not even the one you would gamble on, would it be? Yeah, you could gamble on this fairly easily and have a high chance of getting more cards. I think we leave it at that. What's interesting here is, as far as these legacy packs, I have 451 of them, and I can only open them in 10 packs, which is interesting. And the collection here is not all 6,000 of the cards that are in Master Duel. They are probably a slightly more curated selection of cards. Alright, so this is just going to take a while, so I think what we'll do here is we'll do one card pack opening just to show it, and then we'll start to skip, because you're not really going to see you're really not going to see as many cards anyways when there's only 2. And as far as I've seen, they are always new. And it probably will be that way. I'm assuming it will be that way until I have one copy of every legacy pack. At that point, it kind of sucks because you can't do anything else with the legacy packs, and the legacy packs are the default reward that you get if you're going to get any pack in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I think that's probably a mistake. It would make a lot more sense if you got random packs in general when you won in ranked, but you don't. You get pathetic amounts of gems, somewhere around 3 to 8 gems sometimes when you do get gems, or you get a single card that's often a normal or rare card, one that's not even that important of a card. So it's just not really worth it. And you can see opening 10 packs gives you 20 cards. That's not really a lot. So it is way easier to just click the skip button and go down here, and then it would be more informative to do this if you really want to look at the cards, but at the moment, like, what is this? Shiny Black Sea. I have no idea what this is even supposed to be a depiction of. But I just have so many cards right now that it's not worth it. It's interesting to notice you can get super rares. I was thinking the vast majority of these would be rares and normals. And it does seem like that is going to play out that way. Let's see. I did want to get cards from the Destiny board series of cards, but that's questionable. Here's a card that I know is particularly old, and I think that may be a particularly old card. Actually, a lot of these seem fairly recognizable, and if I recognize a card, I know it's a particularly old card because I was definitely not heavy into watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Or playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I specifically remember this Thunder Nyan Nyan card is a particularly old one, but it's interesting how it really does not visually match the vast majority of other art in the game. Yu-Gi-Oh's art is fairly weird, particularly the older cards anyways. It feels like there's at least 4 or 5 different animators just churning out as much art as possible. But the idea of a 1980s cat girl character didn't get expanded on. You'd think, yeah, all these years later you might consider going back and touching upon that and saying, hey, let's bring a whole series of cat girls around. Let's bring a ridiculous art like that back and make some sense from it. But I imagine it's probably more of a case that they just would rather forget that it ever exists. Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't... Alright, here we go. Here's a card that's a duplicate. Here's a card that's a duplicate. Here's a card that's a duplicate. So we are starting to hit that point where we will get duplicates. So my hope / assumption was wrong. It's not a guaranteed you won't get any duplicates until you have one of everything. It was just a case that since the pool is so big, since there is nearly 4,000 cards to get, that you would just statistically very likely to get mostly new cards. And that still will be the case. I've said this before, but it would kind of make sense if they introduced a character into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cartoons that was animating and drawing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and they introduced him as this kind of weird artist that draws all these weird images as a personality trait. See, that was, even in that process, a fairly slow experience because we barely got 100 cards open. I don't expect there to be anything else you can do with Legacy Paths. Here we've got an ultra rare, but it wasn't new. Yeah. So you might as well spend every single one of these that's possible. It doesn't even feel like this follows the same rules where if you don't get an ultra rare, you're not guaranteed to get an ultra rare the next pool. So you might as well just exhaust this. The only thing I would say is it's probably not really worth your effort to not open in packs of 10. So if we end up with 3 or 4 extra packs, I guess we'll very likely end up with 1 extra pack. It's probably not worth it to open that 1 extra pack. Although it probably wouldn't matter one way or the other. Let's open 1 more pack and then reevaluate where we are. Yeah, you're still getting the vast majority of cards being new. And then when we scroll down here, we are filling in the gaps slowly, but it definitely feels like at most we could say maybe we have 40% of all the cards. Problem with this, though, is you get all these cards handed to you. They're not being handed to you in a slow enough process that you would actually click on a card and evaluate it and try and build that, put that new card in your deck. And that's where the original concept of real world collectible card games would push you towards, is that you would be a kid and you would spend $1 on a card pack. I know the card packs now are probably closer to $3.50 than an actual dollar. But you would try to play every single card, and every single card would be very precious. Very quickly, collectible card games, though, became obvious in that the vast majority of cards aren't precious, and the vast majority of cards aren't playable. They are just trash cards. And in a digital format, if every time I got one of these legacy packs I had just opened that single pack and gotten just 2 cards, then I would have really evaluated at that point and really thought about adding it to some deck that I had built. But because everything is modern and digital, you're not likely to even build a deck yourself. You're almost certainly going to look online or get some suggestions or some help in that direction. Well, here's 5-headed dragon. It's a pretty big card, but apparently I already owned it. What's weird, though, is there's a lot of cards like this that I've been playing in the festival, I guess. And I've been playing them enough in the normal and rare festival that took a week that I thought I owned that card. So, while it visually would hurt the game, it almost would make more sense if there was a special card back or a special symbol on every card that is a loaner card to indicate and just constantly remind the player that you don't own this. If you want this, you have to go craft it. Almost if there was like a border around it or something, or if everything that you actually owned was the foil quality of cards and loaner versions of cards were just the basic quality of cards. Here we have a 1-star special card. I don't even know what the black border cards are. I guess that's an XYZ card. Yeah. This is actually hurting my finger, so much clicking. And yeah, inevitably, I will probably have 400 or 500 more legacy packs to open next expansion that happens probably in 72 days. 2 months from now, and some change, 2.5 months from now, and it will be a fairly different experience, I suspect, where we'll start to see half of every card being new, or even fewer than half of every card being new, unless they expand the Legacy collection more, or they decide to give you packs of the Master Duel packs instead, which would probably make sense. Half the time give Legacy pack collections, and half the time give Master Duel cards. These cards being called Legacy, though, doesn't really make them feel like they're cards that you just cannot play nowadays. They seem like they're a decent, well, at least some of them are decent cards. A lot of them are like normal cards here. Like this Ancient Jar here would almost certainly never see play unless there was some synergy around Ancient Jar I don't know about. Whereas being able to attack twice and being a 1300 might see some play if you have nothing better. Although the vast majority of cards tend to be around 15 to 1800 attack. So a lot of these are fairly weak because of power creep. Yeah. I guess I'm not particularly an expert or even that well informed as far as what would be playable in modern time. It might be very much that even things, even cards that look interesting or that I recognize may not actually be playable in the current meta. And the Legacy packs may very well be here just to feed the nostalgia of people like me who watched the original anime more than to give you cards that you can actually play, because you do have this split audience of people who are old getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Versus people who have never stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And you have to try your best to serve both audiences. Here we got lucky and got almost 100% new cards. Some of these cards are not particularly from the first series of the anime even. Like this hero cards, I think, are from actually the second series of the anime, but with the new characters, the second group of characters. There's been about 4 or 5 groups of characters in the series, each seeming to have multiple seasons. I wish I had the attention span to potentially watch all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime from beginning to end, each of the series, but I know I never would have the attention span. And it's not even a matter of time. Like, most people wouldn't have time, but I could potentially make time to watch all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cartoons, but I definitely couldn't pay attention to it. I would get very bored. It's almost certainly a series that would make sense to be abridged by some anime YouTubers or something. But most of the abridged anime YouTube series are done comedically and tell you just the general points. I don't know if anybody actually seriously abridges something and tries to keep the important parts while getting rid of the unimportant parts. So yeah, at this point I could open one pack. I don't see a reason to. We'll just leave it on the one. Yeah, and again, if I got the itch, I could spend another 1,000 to buy 10 packs on the secret packs. And we need to potentially see now where we are, or try to get a general idea as far as the Master Duel packs. 6,830 cards are available. This pool of cards heavily overlaps, I think, every other card that exists. I don't think there's any selection packs or anything of newer cards that aren't involved in this. And yeah, you can see we're probably somewhere around 10%, maybe 15% full as far as these cards. It is a massive list, one that you can reasonably be expected to actually scroll through, and being able to like filter it down to just like normal cards, that's still probably, that's 2,000 cards still being shown. And the only ones I guess you really would care about would be the ultra rares and the super rares. It's still not a smart move to buy the master packs. So again, we'll just cross our fingers and make sure and hope nothing else gets released anytime soon. No new structure packs, which are probably your best bet, because structured packs are literally a deck, and you buy it 3 times and then you have at least 3 copies of every card in that deck. And or a bundle deal wouldn't be a terrible idea. Bundle deals, I guess, are the way you would want to open master packs, is through a bundle. And if they never offer any new bundles, or if it takes them forever to offer any more bundles, secret packs, or crafting cards to find secret packs, makes a lot of sense. Notice that this is a category labeled as bonus pack, so at any point they could be offering bonus packs of just the standard master pack. Right. And in that process of doing all of that, I would have found some more secret packs. So now it says I've found 80 out of 100. I don't know if that means just find 100 keys, or if that means you have to actually find 100 separate unique secret packs. It's believable that there would be actually 100 unique secret packs in the game. So now what we wanted to make was this deck, this Zodiac Tri-Brigade, and I didn't have the dust for it. You can see as far as ultra rares and super rares, there's not a lot of dust. As far as normals and even rares, there's really not a lot of dust. It would be fairly silly, even having 1,000 rare dust, to try and just craft one of every rare card. It's better to sit on it. But we can click over here on the hamburger menu to dismantle all extra cards and see, with all of the packs we've opened, you are going to get 440 normal dust, 790 rare dust, 40 super rare dust, and a whopping 10 ultra rare dust. So there was only one ultra rare we didn't have 3. We had 4 or more copies on. Let's see, we could look on this card list, which I don't think has too much being blocked out. We could show the forbidden ones too, I guess. And this would be your full list of cards that are available in the game in a fairly awful way of depicting it. And again, all you can do is generally just try to estimate, say maybe we're even approaching 20% of all the cards, but that's probably about as high as I'd be willing to guess. I wouldn't be surprised if it's lower than that. And just like a terrible interface. So if I was going to try and craft this, I don't have enough. If I was going to try and craft this, I have enough to craft that one and that one. So and that opened up a secret pack by doing that. So I'm not making a lot of progress as far as trying to make the Zodiac Tri-Brigade happen. Of course, I could take this deck that I saw online and say, forget it, and just get rid of these cards, and you'd be fairly close to having a decent deck. I probably should just go for that, make a copy of this deck, and then do that. The only other thing you could potentially do here is say, show me just normal cards, and then filter here by number owned, and we could then probably filter here by this, and this. And the reason you'd want to do that is so that you could have effect cards, which would be way better. And you could start to craft things in a very slow process. And you'll fairly quickly burn through everything. So you probably want to leave this, at least 90. I wouldn't be too crazy to have like 300 available to you. Also, like, it's gonna be a while before you could rebuild the number of duplicates. And this is kind of random order, I imagine. I'm probably crafting a bunch of 1-star cards. And you would always hope that by crafting these cards, you're unlocking them in some kind of draw pool, which would increase your odds of getting other cards. But it almost is never actually the case. That's more superstition than science. But yeah, that seems about reasonable. Bring down your neutral cards, your normal cards down to 300. You can see that did not get you very far as crafting cards. There's still a massive amount of cards to get. In fact, the vast majority of the cards to get. Like 3/4 of the entire list. And that is also excluding normal cards, which would have made it even a different experience. If there was a faster way to do this, there might be a slightly faster way to do this if you put these cards in a deck. There might be a way to prompt you to just automatically craft everything that is in that deck. But this may also just be the slow process. Yep. Because I'm only crafting normal and rare cards, there's probably only going to be one secret pack that unlocks. A lot of these rare cards do feel like they have more actual playability. Like I'm recognizing some of these cards and saying, oh yeah, I could actually play this. Of course, the only deck I've actually tried to build was around summoning Exodia. So that's not a particularly great deck, or great deck to try and put different cards around. This definitely is an experience that's more monotonous than exciting. There might be a keyboard shortcut if I figured out what it was, or I could just click on something and then hit the key on the keyboard. We didn't make it all the way down to one page. I think same thing goes. There's very little animations when you craft the cards this way, as far as whether you get a foil or a non-foil version of a card. So you may have noticed that a couple times here we have created foil versions of cards. Not that I particularly care if I get a foil version of a card or not, because visually they look almost exactly the same when played. Which we will get to a point where we actually play Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. I never did understand why the pack opening videos, particularly when I was playing Hearthstone, were so popular, but they did seem to be fairly popular. So I would like this video to be as popular as some of those videos. Like anything on my channel to be popular, or everything on my channel to be popular, certainly. I guess better that I spend my gems versus other people spend the gems or real world money to to buy gems. We still are just opening 1-star or generating 1-star cards. There probably was an extra filter I should have thrown into this to start at the bottom, or at the very least what I could have done is scrolled down to, let's see, I guess here, then I could have been making 12-star rare cards, which are probably more playable. Extra cards or anything that goes on the extra deck is really something you should probably only craft if you know what you're doing. You'd be better off making random spell cards or crafting random spell cards instead. Let's see. I'm going to generate 3 of these and try and remember to put those in my Exodia deck. And generate 1 of this. And then I'm probably going to leave everything else alone. Even though there definitely are some cards here to consider. Some very, very basic cards here to consider. I almost certainly made a mistake here. And should have crafted spell cards. Oh well, moving on. So we unlocked this one, which we already have a decent collection of those cards. So, no real idea. Duel passes have been revamped. You now get a total of 300 gems. With the Duel Pass Gold, you get a total of 800 gems and a Moki Moki Mate. The normal and rare festival has ended. We'll see when the next festival happens. Ruler's Mask and Beyond Speed selection packs have been reset. The season has been reset. It ends at the end of the month. Each season is going to be another month. More solo stuff has happened. Still doesn't feel like there's a ton of fanfare on all of this. But I think they'll eventually get to the point where we start to see articles and press releases for new expansions in the same way that we see articles and press releases around updates to some of the other like live services, free-to-play games. We have to fast forward through a spectate duel here before everything resets at noon. And even fast forwarding through these spectate duels, you can occasionally start to recognize some cards that definitely feels like it's giving you a hint towards what you should be crafting. The system feels a little generic, I will say, in that every single reward is always gems. Feels like sometimes it should be dust. Some of these unlimited missions do give you other collectible things, but I don't think any of them ever give you dust. Legacy packs. things like that. Seems like not that far away from 500 ranked duel wins. You'd expect there hopefully to be more of a reward than just one legacy pack. You'd really want more of a reward for getting to Duelist level 25 than 50 gems. There's definitely that concern that I think all I can do now is play ranked anyways. Yep. There's that concern though that I'll do all of the unlimited missions, and once I finish all of the unlimited missions, can't play that anymore. I'll never be able to earn gems again, and so it is possible by the next selection pack update that I just won't have the gems because I'll stick with being a free-to-player, and there'll just be no opportunities to earn gems that way. Because the season reset, we are playing at Silver 4, or I need 2 more victories to get to Silver Tier 3. So, yep. The Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is out tomorrow. They've been hyping it up. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter feed since it has been an hour and 30 minutes. Yeah, the early review scores from OpenCritic is 84, Metacritic is 86 for Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. So that sounds like good news. There was certainly some concern there that it might have just been too off the mark, or that the delays in making the Skywalker Saga may have been too much. A season 2 for Minecraft Dungeons is coming, which I'm shocked at that, really, but it is Microsoft, so I guess they have they probably have enough money to to throw at Minecraft Dungeons, even if it isn't that much of a success. Let's play this. And so give me a ritual spell. Let's play this. Set this. If I set this, will it flip summon? Or did I just waste that? PAX East is a few weeks away. On April 21st at 2:30, the Gearbox main stage will have a celebration of Borderlands franchise, updates from Gearbox Publishing, and more fun things to celebrate. So Gearbox is effectively trying to be have their own kind of directs, which, in all fairness, everybody else is trying to have their own kind of directs. Arcane Studios, which is a subsidiary of Bethesda, which is a subsidiary of Microsoft, is looking for a senior video FX artist. So that does tell us that Arcane Studio is working on a game. Right now, they're showing off Redfall as the game that is a good example of what you might do. Apparently there was a Fortnite fundraising drive from Epic Games and Xbox that raised $144 million for Ukraine humanitarian relief efforts. Interestingly, though, I didn't hear a lot of news around that. So it kind of feels like because Fortnite and Epic were involved, it got iced out by my slightly biased or sometimes heavily biased news sources. Although at a certain level, it might be better if you just hear the outcomes from these relief effort drives instead of hearing about them when they are trying to collect money from individuals. Like, if the story was, instead of them doing a fundraising drive, that it was literally just Epic and Microsoft committed $144 million of their own money, that would feel nicer. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm caught up now as far as new news. So we have some pretty big news here. GameDeveloper.com. The Monkey Island creator Ron Gilbert is returning to the franchise. The veteran developer is currently working on a third installment called Return to Monkey Island. So this would be, in Ron Gilbert's mind, the third game in the series, when in reality it would probably be closer to the sixth or seventh game in the series. So it would be Secret of Monkey Island being the first game. I believe it is Escape from Monkey Island would be the second game, whatever Monkey Island 2 is. And then Return to Monkey Island would continue the story there. And even looking at this art, you can see it is trying to stick more towards the art style of the first two games, which was very pixely and flat. It is not going to touch upon Monkey Island 4, which went in a 3D direction, or Monkey Island 5, which was, I think, the Telltale games. There is, before you get completely hyped though, I think Monkey Island 2 is called Monkey Island 2 LeChuck's Revenge. So they're skipping Escape from Monkey Island, which would have been the actual third game, if I'm recalling correctly. There is something though to be worried about, the fact that Ron Gilbert may not have been the sole reason why the first couple of Monkey Island games were good, and they definitely could have been products of their time. He did make Thimbleweed Park a while ago to very little fanfare. But also it's worth pointing out decades upon decades have passed since the last Ron Gilbert Monkey Island effort has been made. So yeah, it would be nice if he could make another one and it was just a nostalgic blast from the past and everything was great. But it is also very reasonable to be cautiously optimistic and say they may not just be able to do the same kind of story. If for instance, Elaine Marley, I think it was her name, the female love interest of sorts, became a major focus in a new Monkey Island game, and our Guybrush Threepwood character was sidelined, if there was just a bunch of woke propaganda in it, if it was just didn't quite feel right in any way, it would be a fairly large disappointment. And you do definitely run into that problem. Even Borderlands, which is a much newer series, has run into that problem where it's really hard to feel like the Borderlands series has maintained the feeling of Borderlands 1. It started to lose the feeling and the writing style of Borderlands 1 even by the time Borderlands 2 was coming out. Apparently they have something here that is stopping me from activating any cards. So let's go over to main phase 2 and see if we can activate any cards. Nope. We could try and figure out which card is influencing what, but the game's not making that obvious. But yeah, fingers crossed, cautiously optimistic. This new game will work. The new Monkey Island game is being copyrighted by LucasArts, which is owned by Disney. So my assumption here is that this is literally Disney, since they don't really want to do any in-house game development, just licensing back the Monkey Island license to Ron Gilbert, and Ron Gilbert is going to do it with his own team that made Thimbleweed Park, if he even has a team, or he's just going to do it on his own. So it may not be anything big. In fact, it might be almost 180-degree counterpoint to something like Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, which is remaking and continuing remaking the first Lego game and continuing the Lego Telltale, no, not Telltale, TT Games, Traveler's Tales games series. And in this, with this very high review, they have added new features, added new polish, and brought it to the next generation. I wouldn't be surprised if a new Monkey Island game is very much of the feeling and of the appearance of the old Monkey Island's games. This is slightly surprising to me from Gamatsu. Seven Pirates H, or probably more accurately pronounced Seven Pirates Ecchi, launches May 12th in the West. Physical editions are also available for pre-order. This is the pirate anime girls in bikinis game, and the anime girls look fairly short and more chibi. You can even see that the YouTube video here has been age restricted. It's a little surprising that that's coming over to the West, particularly when it's coming over to the West for the Switch. I don't think Nintendo cares that much, but I do think they kind of care a little bit. We have yet to see a case where Nintendo is allowed just straight up adult content, like adults only rated games, or mature rated game. Well, I don't know. Come to think of it, they definitely have had mature games on the Switch, haven't they? So I guess it would just be adults only games, or getting very close to the line of being an adults only game. Of course, it also might be a case that specific game just dances close to the line and shows bikini girls as pirates and doesn't go any further. There is definitely something to be said for lewd versus explicit in content anyways. Once you've seen hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of naked breasts, it starts to become more interesting to see the pasties, or to see the micro bikini tops and the two-piece. Sometimes the negative space or the implication is more interesting than the reality. It can get very cold and clinical. And you always, I suppose, desire what you don't have. Moving on from that probably awkward conversation, Laka 4.1 has a release candidate. This is one of the operating systems that is, I think, often targeted for hardware like the Raspberry Pi, but no, I don't think is completely exclusive to the Raspberry Pi. But they've got a new update. It's going to update RetroArch to 1.10.2, which still may be a fairly old version, because particularly the Raspberry Pi versions of these operating systems tend to be behind the times. Just might as well lose here. It's adding a new core for the Neo Geo Pocket for the BK0010. I don't even know what that would be. The Philips CDI. A new version of MAME. MAME did, I think, release a new version fairly a couple of days ago on April Fool's Day. And a new core for the Sony PlayStation. DuckStation has been removed. They've updated Mesa, that's a video, open source video drivers, I believe. They've updated. I don't even know why I'm bothering to do this, but whatever. Might as well activate card. Let's see, they've updated the mainline kernel to 5.10.109 for PC, Amlogic, Allwinner, and NXP versions. The Raspberry kernel, though, for the Raspberry Pi version has been updated to 5.10.103, so there's something in those 6 different numbers of the kernel update that they couldn't handle. NVIDIA support has now been fixed. The driver is now compiled as a module. That again wouldn't matter for the Raspberry Pi version. They've added support for USB Wi-Fi dongle for the Asus BT500 and the TP-Link UB500. That's particularly getting into the weeds. They've added a Python library to all Raspberry Pi images. That's support for custom scripts for various cases. And system files for standalone cores have been added. You no longer need to add them manually. But on the counterpart of that, they now have disabled the system file downloaders, which effectively says we're just going to give you the files you need by default instead of having people use a downloader, because inevitably somebody was using the downloader to download the files, then using the downloader to download the files again, not realizing that they didn't need to do it, or that it really wasn't updating anything every time they were doing that. They say it was to avoid incompatibility, but it almost certainly saves them on some bandwidth too. Bluetooth pairing. Also, I haven't played around with Laka, but I may at some point get the extra time and try it out. It would be kind of hard for me to decide to skip over from Retro Arc and Retro Pi to Laka. Although there are definitely some reasons why you might stop using Retro Pi, as it is kind of slow to develop operating system. They seem to move fairly slow in their steps, and they seem to not really have a lot more gas in the tank as far as adding new features or thinking of new ideas. But at a certain point, unless we can get a Raspberry Pi 5, which there have been some rumors of Raspberry Pi 5s being announced, there's not much more you can do. Even the Raspberry Pi 4s have been extremely limited, and while they were definitely a power boost, they weren't quite enough of a power boost to take RetroPie as an operating system to the next level and say run something like the Dolphin emulator to play Wii games or anything like that. It's still very much a question as to can you properly configure RetroPie on the Raspberry Pi 4 to even run all the Nintendo 64 games accurately. And you will just hit that level where there aren't any more consoles to emulate, or there isn't enough programming power to emulate the newer consoles, or there's not enough space on a micro SD card, even unless you're going to buy a 2 terabyte micro SD card to hold the files for bigger games. Like, there's a big difference from something like Super Mario Bros. 1, which is probably less than a megabyte, and Super Mario 64, which is probably, I bet, somewhere around 20 megabytes of code and gigabytes upon gigabytes of space that's used nowadays. Alright, so those were the extra bits of news. Now we'll have more of a linear experience with the news. We had already kind of talked about Halo Infinite's developer conceding that the community is out of patience. GameStop confirmed that it's holding a PS5 in-store sales event this Saturday. When was this actually published? April 2nd, so that's an old article too. Let's see, the box versions of GTA 5 have been dated for the PS5 and PS4 and Xbox Series X, coming out April 12th. Let's see, we can see we're already working our way through the Duel Pass, just playing the game. Video Games Chronicle says Sony, quote, could be working, end quote, to bring proper PS3 game emulation to the PS5, it's claimed. Which, yeah. At a certain level, I suspect there is some truth to that. That Sony probably is working on PlayStation 3 emulation at all times. But I think it stops fairly quickly, because I think what the next part of that idea I think the next part of that idea is that there's probably only 1 or 2 people working on it. I suspect Yeah, that was a rambling mess of a statement. What am I really trying to say there? Yeah, I suspect there's one person inside of Sony that is actually trying to always get the emulation working. But I think that is literally only one person. So I suspect it doesn't go any further than that. I've tried twice to say the same thing and failed miserably. Well, what's going on right now is I'm trying to get this functional cookies and cookie preferences warning to go away, and I've like disabled every ad blocker that I think I have here, and it still seems like I can't do anything. I bet this is because my DNS is blocking it, come to think of it. Right, so instead of doing that, let's turn this back on, reload here, come over here, block this, reload here. Let's come over here and fix this the other way by just getting rid of the notification, because I don't know why I'm even trying to. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm trying to do here. Yeah. Because I'm literally just trying to accept an ad when the whole point of having a fairly complicated ad blocking system on my Wi-Fi router is to block these ads. And then the whole point of having even extra ad blocking what in the world is going on here? I need to focus on playing. Let's pick here. Pick here. Yeah, that was way too much work to just block the embed alert. Now, does this mean at some point Video Games Chronicles articles are going to have videos that it's just not going to show me? Maybe. But I don't think so, because this is a video. So whatever it was trying to embed before was more than likely an actual ad. Oh, man. Maybe I am getting a little sleepy at this point. To waste that much time. Moving on, back to video game news. Video Games Chronicle says Jim Ryan, the head of Sony of California, Sony Interactive Entertainment, quote, has more studio acquisitions planned. The exec argues not adopting a Game Pass style strategy is allowing it to invest in M&A activity. M&A would be something in acquisitions. I don't know what the M would stand for. What's funny though is the actual quote that I saw in a different version of this article was that he specifically said as a sentence, that they need to continuously acquire people to maintain success. Not that it is just a luxury that they can do, but that he feels Sony has to continue to acquire to survive. And that is 100% a marker of a business that has failed, in the sense that it has stopped being a business that makes products and sells products and has become a business that is all about just selling itself through its share price, through getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Unlimited possibilities of growth are not really a thing, so that indicates a bubble there, that Sony has capped out on its actual value and now can only grow in value by becoming a bigger company, bigger monopoly, bigger corporation. And I imagine that happens to a lot of people, a lot of businesses, that there is just nothing more AT&T or Verizon can do, so they have to acquire other businesses to keep on growing. Not winning particularly fast, but that's fine. Now, take note, you're only getting like 3 or 8 crafting points. These crafting points are now, as we can see, since you need 30 of them to craft anything, they are still being fairly greedy as far as handing out crafting points. And they're not making up with gems enough to make that a great value. Moving on, Elden Ring's publisher wants to work with the author Brandon Sanderson, never heard of him, and he has a Soulsborne pitch. Bandai Namco has sent a note to the author. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the new way in which they're going to get hype, is that they're going to pretend like famous authors. I guess Sanderson is best known for Mistborn and Stormlight Archive fantasy novels. They're going to get their names as executive producers on games, and then that will hype up people. There has been very, very little evidence that the George R.R. Martin investment as far as Elden Ring was particularly large. It's very believable that he wrote a general guideline, a general character bible, something like that, and then never did anything more on the project. There's been no claims even that he was heavily involved in development from the beginning to the end. Moving on, New Starfield early images have allegedly leaked online. This is the latest in a series of images of an early version of the Bethesda game. Everything I have seen of Starfield, though, has given me the feeling that it's going to be set kind of in something that feels a lot like the real world, just maybe 100, 200 years in the future, where space travel is fairly commonplace. It looks like real computers. It's not magic fantasy like Elder Scrolls. It's not crazy diesel punk, steampunk, or I don't know if it's even called diesel punk as far as the Fallout series. It's like uranium punk, maybe is the right way to call it. There is some backstory and hints that the Fallout series, and the Enclave in particular from the Fallout series, were planning to go to space, and that there would be room for a Fallout series set in space, at least in part. There's already been a DLC where you were in space in Fallout 3, but I think they're going to play it much more realistic and less comedic for Starfield, which arguably, I don't know if that 100% works, because Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls series is a little silly. It's not super silly, but it definitely has its silly moments. Fallout is really silly. There are definitely some silly sections, and suspension of disbelief, I guess, is the real phrase to use there in both cases. If Starfield literally is just like Call of Duty, where it's way too serious for its own good, I don't know if that really would play. And there is, I think, a real question as to, is there somebody that's controlling the writing and the style for Bethesda games, or is it possible that there will be a different kind of voice in the writing and the style of Starlink that just feels awkward? I guess you never know. I mean, it could be that it is written a lot like the Doom reboots, and when you get away from actual Bethesda and just look at the other companies ZeniMax owns, those games are written in fairly different voices and styles. So at a certain point, what makes a Bethesda game, and what of those things that make a Bethesda game are actually good? Because a lot of the procedurally generated crashy, buggy stuff that makes a Bethesda game is not stuff that anybody really wants to see in Starfield. It could be that Starfield comes out and it just establishes a new narrative as to how Bethesda games play and how Bethesda games look, and then we have a Fallout 5 that is really, really serious and not that silly at all, and we have a Elder Scrolls 6 or Skyrim 2, whatever you call it, that is really serious and takes itself more serious than any of the previous games. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Abandoned's developer claims it reached out to the Silent Hill publisher Konami. Quote, they were really cool. I don't know if it really is that big of a news thing to say that people talk with people. Speaking with journalist Colin Moriarty, I've heard his name. I don't know if he's particularly somebody you want to listen to. The developer behind the game contacted the Japanese publisher following speculation that his project was tied to the dormant horror franchise. But yes, I reached out to them. This was in a paywall podcast. I was stressed out because people thought it was Silent Hills. It got so out of hand, and you know, you're this small developer and you never had a big audience. You're inexperienced. I reached out to Konami saying, hey, you know what? It was never my intention, and they were really cool. But yeah, so it really just feels like the fandom was going crazy thinking Abandoned was actually a Konami game, a Silent Hill game, and that he secretly was actually Kojima, and that this was just a pseudonym. Of course, if you want to believe that conspiracy theory, there's nothing really stopping you from still believing it's that to be true. Let's see if this works. Like, it wouldn't be the first time somebody was hired to pretend to be the person who created a game or wrote a book and be the face of it. What's more interesting, I think, though, is this game Abandoned, and this article is really doing a disservice to point us towards Abandoned as a game and give us a general idea. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try that again. Everybody's still playing Maxi like crazy, which I totally should have just crafted that card. That may be the first amount of damage we've even done today. Apparently Abandoned is still being worked on, because the bottom part about this is in regards to the latest rumor regarding Abandoned being cancelled, our response is that these rumors are false. So the game's not even out yet. This is the first I've even heard of Abandoned. It looks interesting as like one of these Japanese horror games. And what makes a Silent Hill game is probably not that much. So being making a Japanese game where you're wandering around an environment and fighting monsters, depending on how that visually looks, could easily look like a Silent Hill game. One thing I would say is that in trying to make something like Abandoned, they need to try to make just one interesting monster and focus on that. I feel like The Evil Within tried to have 3 or 4 different interesting monsters, and then it became hard to really focus in and overemphasize and make popular that one interesting monster. Ruvek in the first Evil Within should have been the monster the whole time, and the safe head guy probably should have been in his own game, or the scary haired Japanese monster woman Should have been a separate game. Like, almost all the secondary monsters, the butcher guy at the very beginning of the game, almost all of them are more interesting than Ruvek is, and Ruvek should have been the main character. He was storyline-wise the main character, but he's easily forgettable. Moving on, Jim Ryan says PlayStation Plus new games library will have, quote, all the big names present. Titles such as Returnal and Death Stranding and Mortal Kombat have been confirmed so far. But remember, they have said specifically it's not going to be day one and date with all, like, first-party titles. They haven't guaranteed something like that. Apparently, also, according to Video Games Chronicles, a demo for an unannounced Gex game has appeared online. The game may have been planned to be a sequel to the Gex trilogy, which, okay, sounds cool, but probably doesn't matter too much because it's probably never going to happen. Apparently, this was also dated in 2001, so it's not like it's a new game. I don't think I've ever played the Gex games, so I really couldn't tell you anything about them. They're probably second tier 3D platformers if I was to guess. Moving on, Paramount is reportedly delighted as the Sonic 2 movie tops overseas markets. Which, okay. Sonic movies seem to be doing well. Apparently during the Grammys, an orchestra's Kirby cover song won a Grammy. Which, okay. I can't help but feel like there is a situation here where the I can't help but wonder if it isn't a case that the Grammys are getting more attention this year just because of all of the whole Oscar drama and Will Smith and all that. So yeah, they're probably talking about the Grammys a little bit more than most people would. I looked at all the nominations on the Grammys just on a whim, and all it did is confirm to me that I am not a music person and I don't listen to any music at all on a year-to-year basis, and I barely recognize the artists' names, let alone the songs. I'm guessing this is a case that because these functional cookies are being blocked in some new system, they must have just updated their system. They're not showing me embedded images of, like, tweets, because this says this was a tweet, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense that this would be the embedded tweets of people or embedded images of other people's stuff. Of course, if I just block all that content, it kind of doesn't matter that much, because then it just looks like it's never there in the first place. And at the end of the day, I guess that just saves me time. Didn't play fast enough, and there I conceded, or the game conceded on my behalf. Let's see, moving on, Video Games Chronicles says a new Elden Ring patch buffs the Stars Scourge Radon's attack. I guess that's one of their monsters. Elden Ring seems to be full of a lot of monsters. I don't know if there's too much of a story that I've figured out yet as far as Elden Ring. It just kind of feels like it's a giant world full of monsters, much like Dark Souls is a giant world full of monsters, and there is a story there, but you'd really have to play the whole game from beginning to end to know it, and you'd still probably have to read a lot of lore on items to figure out the lore and the story of Dark Souls. Let's see. Moving on. Video Games Chronicles says a leak suggests that World of Warcraft's next expansion could be called Dragonflight, which, let's see, Activision Blizzard's acquisition at this point is not finalized by any means, so it would kind of make a lot of sense to still boycott World of Warcraft and Activision Blizzard in general if you were boycotting them already. There are, I think, even specific reasons why you might just boycott World of Warcraft, since World of Warcraft, the new content in World of Warcraft has not been blowing away its fans in quality. And they weren't, I think, particularly happy with the way the story was going, if I recall correctly. So yeah, now would probably be about the worst time to get into World of Warcraft. Wait until Microsoft acquires them, and even at that, potentially you would want to play the legacy servers and start over from scratch. And even then, there's a lot of questions as to why you'd want to play World of Warcraft at all and waste so much time playing a game that's now relatively fairly old and ugly looking. Let's see, I'm going to draw a card. I'm going to activate this. Okay, you want to do that? You're gonna play that way. I will summon this guy. Destroy that guy. Attack and end. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says World of Tanks developer Wargaming is axing its Russia and Belarus studios. The developer will cut ties in Russia and close Minsk studio. Now, how do you think that really goes down in Russia and Belarus? Like, you might be able to pull that off if you'd moved fast, but since they're like several weeks now into the Russia / Belarus invasion of Ukraine, almost certainly Belarus and Russia would just nationalize and effectively steal any hard property in Minsk studio. They would take the offices, the chairs, the computers, whatever software they can get on the computers, certainly. you almost would have to sneak into the offices and just move everything out, which would mean going into Russia and Belarus, or be able to remote into the computers at least and delete all the files in a very secure way, so that an entire government like Russia couldn't recover it. It's fairly impossible to really say, oh, we're taking our toys and leaving. You can certainly cut ties. The way this is quoted, they will not own or operate any businesses, may very well be a case that they're just gonna let those Minsk studios still exist as their own standalone companies. Yeah. That really just doesn't feel like that would be an easy or smooth procedure to do. Even when you're just firing people or shutting down offices in general, when there's not a war associated with it, it's pretty difficult to do that, and you have to be pretty treacherous and pretty sneaky about how you pull that off. There's a jokey sequence in the Netflix series Arrested Development where one of the business people would tell his entire office that they were moving and have them pack up all their furniture and that they were moving to a new office, and then after everything has been packed up on the back of a truck and driven off, he then tells them that they've all been laid off. But definitely wargaming feels like they're very late to the party, and if somebody was going to make a similar announcement now, they might as well not do it. They might as well just say that they might as well respond to any questions or inquiries as to we've shut this down, we just didn't make a big deal about it, and make a public announcement instead of trying to make a public announcement when you're several weeks too late. And the story's not getting better. It doesn't, like, people that are angry at Russia are even more angry today than they were yesterday. But it's not also like something so drastically different has been revealed to say Russia's really crossed the line now as far as their invasion. They crossed the line when they literally crossed another country's state lines, which was actually something I think they did probably a decade ago, but whatever. Let's see, moving on. Our final Video Games Chronicle article for today, probably. Users are stacking the PlayStation Now subscriptions to net big discounts on the PS Plus Premium, but the ability to do so isn't expected to last long. Via desktop only, as of this publishing, you can purchase 12-month PS Now subscription for $49.99 in UK. That would be converted to a PS Plus Premium membership set to cost $99.99 annually once the service launches in June. Let's see. The US users apparently can no longer do that. So yeah. I guess the question though is, if you were already using PlayStation Now, or that's probably a good deal. Otherwise, you might want to wait and consider whether this new PlayStation Premium service really is for you. Don't get caught up in the hype of it. Moving on, we have some Komatsu articles. Some of these may be old. Yeah, this one is March 31st. Like Vampire the Masquerade launching on April 27th. Ein's Perfect Welt. Anastasis second trailer. Yeah, Disaster Report 5 being open world. Set 3 years after the first game. These are all old articles. I still have not gotten around to reprogramming the software here to try and get it to stop hitting the redundant articles every time. Yeah. Azure Striker Gunvolt 3 launching July 28th. 100 Knots Labyrinth for PS5 launching this summer. The Courier being announced for basically everything. Replica launching April 5th. Space Lines coming out this spring. Or Space Lines from the Far Out coming out this spring. Horgi Who and Friends coming out. This what kind of game is this? A shoot 'em up game with a dog in a plane. Yep. This feels like one of those old NES games that they made a lot of different types of games back in the old days, and we've lost a lot of that variety, but it's probably for a good thing, because almost every game that gets off that beaten path doesn't have a feeling of a more standard play style. Tends to be pretty awful. Here we have a Young Maiden visual novel. Legal Dungeon. Jack Jan. Pokey and Rocky Reshine coming out June 24th in the West. Last Friend for Switch launching April 21st. And then Prinny Presents being announced for the Switch and PC. The romance visual novel Moon remake being announced. I guess this is probably the perfect time, though, to double check these announcements, because April Fool's Day did happen. In this article, the romance visual novel Moon remake announced for Switch and PC has now been updated as April Fool's. Update. With April Fool's Day over in Japan, the teaser website for Moon Remake has reverted back to the style of the original Next on 30th Anniversary website launched earlier this week, which seemed to tease a remake of one Kagayaku Kisetsu. So, Komatsu just chalking it up to being an April Fool's Day joke. I feel like there really should be an apology here in this too. That they're not really taking a lot of responsibility for not investigating whether this is a true thing or not. Like, if I was running a news site, I would outright ban any new news articles coming out on April Fool's Day without doing a massive amount of double checking and confirmation to make sure it wasn't an April Fool's Day joke. Because I just don't want to hurt the credibility of a news site I was involved with, even one day a year. Like, once you hurt your credibility, it almost never comes back. And I definitely would deeply apologize if I put out an article and it turned out to be the source was lying to me, even if it was just an April Fool's Day joke. Real Life Dear You for Switch launches July 28th in Japan. Hyper Light Drifter, a sequel announced. I don't believe that was an April Fool's Day joke. They did have the April Fool's Day compilation. I've scrolled over this a couple of times with really no interest at all in looking at any of this. There's an April Fool's Day version of Minecraft which got rid of the inventory. The vast majority of this other stuff is just uninteresting. I'm assuming that the Shocking Tin from Platinum was an April Fool's Day joke also, but we don't know. Here you have a video, a private video, where they've already taken it down. The only thing I could say is that April Fools might be somewhat worth it to exist if every now and then, if game companies were just pitching ideas instead. If it was, instead of it being an April Fool's on April 1st, if that was just video game open pitch day, then I would maybe say, okay, maybe that makes some sense at that point. Foolish Ideas Day, something like that, where people suggest things, and then if there's a lot of hype or interest around those suggestions, those games might actually get made. Because that definitely is something that you can't ever really do, is you really can't have employees make pitches to the public in almost all cases, and you can't have the public ever pitch ideas, even though the public would definitely love to pitch ideas to the to game developers. E3 being cancelled seems to be real. This game seems to be real, even though it looks pretty weird. Let's see, a game called Overlord Escape from Nazarick launches June 16th. Yeah. Looks like it might be just kind of a side-scroller game. May not be particularly that interesting. What's funny here is I'm going to burn through all of the Gematsu articles, and I'm not sure there's even a single new Gematsu article. Over the weekend, there may have just not been any news, and since I started fairly early today, that may just be the case. Like Capcom Arcade Second Stadium being rated for PC in Korea. Let's see. Pecan Tier version 1.0 update is now available. It's a slow life RPG being fully released. Kind of feels like a Minecraft Terraria clone. I've never heard of it before. Nobunaga's Ambition has yet another trailer, if you're interested in that. Kids on Site Hard Hat Edition has been announced for the PS4 and PC due out June 14th. I would suspect that this is an April Fool's Day joke, and they never did update it. Unless this is a case of some really weird old game being re-released by Limited Run. Even if that was the case, this ugly art, I think, screams April Fool's Day joke. I would be extremely shocked if this was an actual game coming out. I wouldn't be surprised though if the footage that they got here and that they're showing off is actually brand new footage that is just aged to look like old footage. But I also wouldn't be surprised if it is just old footage that they licensed. Of course, this article also came out on April 1st, and Anonymous Code, having 2 hours of gameplay, feels like that is quite a lot of footage to put out if it was an April Fool's Day joke, so I can't believe it was. Anonymous Code is a slightly weird looking visual novel coming out that was announced well before April Fool's Day. Let's see, next on 30th Anniversary Project teaser website has been updated with new artwork and a teaser trailer. So, yep, looks like it's a teaser trailer for probably a visual novel. Dungeons of Aether launches October 25th for PC. Which looks, I guess it's a turn-based RPG. Let's see if we can skip around. Let's see if there's a lot to show. Seems to be kind of dice-based and doesn't seem like they've got a lot of visuals to show off at the moment. See, we're already very close to rank 6 out of 100. Where are we as far as the daily quests? Like, ideally we'll have 4 or 5 of these done. The one thing we don't have done here is actually winning. They did increase the amount of gems you get from these daily quests. So that is something. But this is an odd system where it seems like the time that runs out is just based on a monthly timer as far as daily quests, and that just seems wrong. It seems like the programming's wrong on that. Duel and solo mode 3 times. I tried to get 1 win. I think we still are going to try and get 1 more win. That brings us back up to 1690 as far as our gems also. Sufficient to say, what didn't happen here after spending an hour and a half opening packs is it didn't push me to go and try and build a new deck. Nothing in this game has pushed me to actually try and just take the new cards that I have and build a new deck with it. If I was to even try to look at all the cards I have without having an idea or some assistance, it would be a nightmare scenario. It would just be way too overwhelming from day one. The only deck I've ever actually wanted to craft was an Exodia deck, and even that I didn't bother to go back and try and rebuild that. This is weird from Gamatsu. we had just seen a game called something of Aether, and now we also have Rivals of Aether 2 being announced. So it's like there's 2 of Aether games being announced at the same time. Yep. So fighting game. Again, it might have been an April Fool's Day experience. Am I collecting this stuff? Well, we got a victory. Of course, we'd have to get like 2 or 3 quick victories to move up in rank. And it does feel like you have to go all the way back up from the lowest rank of silver to the lowest rank of gold, where I was before. So finally, after all of that, there's really only about 7 articles from Gamatsu, and finally we're seeing April 2nd as the release days of these articles. Death Smiles 1 and 2 is coming to PC this summer. Currently it's available for the PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. The Death Smiles series, I believe, is a... well, I would have sworn it was a fighting game, but I guess it's not. It's a shoot-'em-up game. Looks pretty old, frankly, in its visuals. Let's see. City Connection is going to re-release Akai Katana in 2022. This also is a shoot-'em-up. This is all part of the Shooters Festival 2022. You can just see they're showing off some art. This is kind of a great example of, I guess, where Japan probably is. People are not so much social distancing, but they are wearing masks. Everybody has their own separate microphone. So yeah, it definitely feels like there's a different style of caution being taken in Japan as far as the pandemic. Or it might be very well been that none of them were wearing masks at all because of the pandemic, and they were just all wearing masks for other reasons. The pandemic, in particular, coronavirus, COVID, is definitely affecting Japan, from what I hear, differently than it's probably affecting the United States, and it's definitely affected third world countries that are very poor, like India, in a very different way than first world countries like the United States. The United States is kind of unique in that it has a lot of open, wide spaces where you can be when you aren't surrounded by people, compared to, say, Tokyo, where the Japanese are forced to be incredibly near each other. Moving on, Layer Section and Galactic Attack as Tribute have been announced for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. This too is almost certainly a shoot-'em-up. Yep, I bet all 5 of these articles are shoot-'em-ups. Not all of them. I guess this week's Japanese game releases is a game called Metal Dogs. Never heard of it. Looks very weird. Odd that there's a physical version of that. Chrono Cross, the Radical Dreamers edition, and more. Chrono Cross, I would say, putting out a new version is getting dangerously close to having enough versions that it would be confusing and difficult to potentially find the right version of the Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross series to want to play. there definitely is enough relevancy there to want to play Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. I don't even really know for certain though if much of the story in Chrono Cross even connects to Chrono Trigger. As far as other games that came out physical digital, there's MLB The Show 22 and Skywalker, the Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Digitally, increasingly we are seeing giant lists of games that are digital only being released, particularly in Japan. See, Gamatsu also says, Crest has established an all-ages visual novel games brand called Novus, which, if it's all ages, then that tells us Crest is not all ages in all of its release. It would be certainly interesting to see visual novels get picked up by, like, younger kids, teenagers, tweenagers, and in the West in particular. Like, although it would be a fairly hard sell to say, hey, these kids all of a sudden are loving to read these visual novels and they're doing so much more reading. The only problem is that they're entering the field of visual novels where well over half of every visual novel is a romance visual novel, and well over a third of every visual novel has some level of lewd content. So I don't think more conservative parents in the West would really care that their kids were reading more if they realized what they were reading were very close to the equivalent of trashy romance novels. As a company, Crest was made up of former Minato Soft development staff, which some of the games named here in Japanese, but I don't recognize any of these names as far as visual novels. So it may very well be that Crest is a fairly new visual novel company to the scene. New to the scene, maybe not particularly that new. Okay, let's do this. It means I have to tribute this, and it means I should have summoned this first. I will take the victory, certainly, but kind of would like to be able to play some more cards. Actually play the game. Yeah, I got 2 legacy packs instead of 1. Or I got 1 normal card. Like, really, they should replace these rewards that give you 1 normal card to 1 pack of Master Duel cards. That would just be 8 old cards instead of 1. But if they were going to make that decision, they would probably have to slowly make that decision, slowly increase the odds to get 2 cards instead of 1, then 3 cards, then 4, then 5, and until they finally gave up and just gave 8 cards. I don't know if Konami is going to be that generous. Moving on, Gamatsu says the IB remake launches April 11th in Japanese, oddly, not in Japan. IB looks weird. They're calling it an adventure game. This is definitely one of those games that I would say is not visually polished enough to quite keep my attention. Yeah. And if that's the remake, there's still plenty of room to make the graphics look better. It probably is fairly difficult, though, to remake graphics that are hand-drawn and kind of unique. To redraw that and make it a better quality without making it very bland and generic, hyper-realistic type of animation could be very hard. Like, I wouldn't want to see Salvador Dali's art redrawn in such a way so this just looks like the Mona Lisa's style of art and romanticized versus surreal. Side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game called Wings of Asteria has a teaser trailer, according to Gamatsu. Again, still seeing a ton of shoot-'em-up games. Alright. See if this works. Let's go ahead and put this on the field too. Shouldn't chain things. You really shouldn't chain the cards unless you need to chain the cards, because making a chain could trigger something else. Summon this, toss this. Okay, so games on Steam. We have Cosmic Monsters 2, Enclave Dawn. It's German only. I was gonna say no to it anyways. We have Ala Cassin Island, which is tagged as early access. I think I'd be very generous to put this on the follow list. Yeah, I'll be extremely generous and give this a follow, but almost certainly by the time I actually get around to looking at this again, it will just be immediately rejected. In fact, yeah, as I've watched more of the footage of it in the video of it, I can just remove it now. We have Karis Valley. Now, any of these games that came out on April 1st could potentially be somebody wasting $100 to list an April Fool's Day joke. This kind of feels like an RPG Maker game, although an adventure game. It's free, so I guess check it out if you're interested. I don't think it quite has enough polish to catch my interest, though. Scorpion Overdrive, third-person shooter. Looks like you shoot scorpions. Early access, first-person, single-player. $6.99. Come on. Let's see. Next we have a game called Blue Rabbit, A World of Shapes and Color and Lost Colors, which looks like absolute garbage. So no to that. We have a game called Burn It Quest, which seems to be some kind of exercise game that interacts with your phone. That doesn't look terrible. I'm gonna put this on the follow list just to see if people like it. It feels like it's a lot like the exercise games, the Wii Fit Adventure type game. That being said, I can say I will in no way ever cover this game and probably never actually play it. But I would like to see if other people like it, just to be informed. Like, there'd be no way for me to sit in front of a microphone or have a microphone in front of me in any way and jump around and exercising. Frankly, I'm not particularly in the physical state to where I think I could be exercising and talking at the same time, or exercising at all. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam here called Baldwin's Bear, which looks like awful graphics. It's free, again, so check it out if you're interested. Here we have something called Ash and Rust, which looks like it is maybe a Diablo-esque top-down hack and slash game. Action RPG hack and slash game. Maybe that's what I should call it more. Early access, $19.74. I'll give it a follow. I'm getting a lot of this waiting for response delays. Here we have a game called Vincimus Air Combat, which visually looks fairly polished. So I guess I need to put it on the follow list because of that. $14.99 English only. There's a connection failure. It almost does not make sense to end on a victory. If we're having connection failures, in particular that's giving us victories, we should keep on playing for more connection failures, more victories. Here we have a game called Permanence TD, which looks like an awful tower defense game. So we can easily dismiss that one. Here we have one that's labeled in Chinese and looks like garbage. So, nope. Here we have something called The Thief. So I guess specifically on this weekend, we're still not really seeing a lot of adult games or even slightly lewd games or just anime girl games at all. But over this weekend and April Fool's Day, we're also not seeing any real quality games at all. So it does feel like on some small level a lot of these games may have been April Fool's Day listings and jokes, and people would have put them on Steam and potentially then tried to put out articles or blog posts saying, yeah, I made this April Fool's Day game, and put it on sale on Steam. This looks awful. Timeless Duel. Doesn't even look like it has duels. Here we have one called Harriet from Slave to Hero. Is that supposed to be Harriet Tubman? Yes. It looks like the Go games. What was that called? Hitman Go. Looks like it's just a direct clone of that and not particularly even done that well. It's free, so I guess you could check it out. But I can't help but be concerned that this would also just be very negative or very preachy. what this is not succeeding at doing is really telling the story of Harriet Tubman as much as it is just having you play a generic game. And if it comes down to the idea that the only way you can educate people about the past is by wrapping it around a very generic kind of bad game, then pretty much everything is lost then. Sometimes stories are important enough to just sit down in calmness and silence and be told, instead of trying to wrap it up in flashiness. If anything, I guess maybe that's a lesson not too many people have learned, considering how that play with the rapping founding father was so incredibly popular and convinced so many people to learn a little bit more about that person that I cannot remember the name of. I guess I was not in the category of people who learned more about him. Hamilton, that's it. No, I remember. Yeah. The whole Hamilton play, if anything, really shows that maybe a lot of people do need the assistance mentally through Flash and rapping in that case. We want to activate everything here, even if we are going to lose. Well, that didn't work. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Minibot Expedition, which just looks like a generic platformer, collected gems type game. One of the things about Mirror's Edge Catalyst, speaking of collecting gems, is just how much the game runs into the Sonic problem. Sonic ran around collecting gems, is my connective tissue there. But yeah, the Sonic problem, as far as almost all Sonic games, they want you to run fast, but then it inevitably punishes you for running fast, because the act of running fast ends up having you run into a spike or run into a pit and fall to your death. Mirror's Edge Catalyst has that in spades as a problem, whereas Mirror's Edge 1, the original Mirror's Edge, does not have that problem, because Mirror's Edge 1, instead of trying to be an open world game, knew it was always going to be a linear experience, and that every hallway you ran through was going to be pretty much the same hallway everybody else ran through. I don't think there really is a split path in the entirety of Mirror's Edge 1. It feels like you're choosing where you're going, but you really aren't. Whereas Mirror's Edge Catalyst, you can totally choose where you're going, but then often it will point you in the wrong direction, and you'll end up at something that is halfway towards a full dead end, or there have been at least 2 or 3 times where it has told me to jump somewhere, or it's made me feel like I was supposed to jump somewhere and that be the wrong place. Or it is the right way to jump, but I haven't jumped high enough or far enough because I didn't know where I was even supposed to be landing. And because I didn't have the full understanding of that, then I'm still ending up falling to my death. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Get Your Sheep Together, which doesn't look like much of anything. Looks like it's just an asset flip joke game. So no to that. We have a game called Wart, W-A-R-T, which is some kind of strategy board game I've never heard of. Looks like it might be Chinese. $5.09, English and Chinese. It doesn't really feel like this game would explain to me how you actually play it. But I'm going to be very generous and put it on the follow list to see if maybe people still like it. Next we have a Chinese titled game that looks like it's an asset flip first person shooter, which is weird because asset flip first person zombie shooters are definitely not the kinds of games you would expect from Chinese developers. But that is exactly what it seems to be. We have one called COG back in the 80s, which COG almost certainly is name confusion attempt of COD, Call of Duty. $2.99 English only. There's nothing there of any interest to me. Let's see, might as well set a card and then return. Here we have a game on Steam called Tank Tactics, which looks like it's just a top-down twin-stick shooter tank game with no real interest. $18.99 English only. He's summoned in a new character. Here we have a game on Steam called Caverns of Evil, which just looks like an asset flip dungeon crawler. A lot of garbage this weekend. Here we have a horror game, it looks like, called Office Elevator. Yep, nothing here to grab my attention. Let's see, Virtual Aquarium Overlay desktop game. I wouldn't really hate something that was more gamified around this idea. I don't know if that doesn't, if you gamify it though, that doesn't really ruin the idea of just having an aquarium. In a lot of ways, having fish is about wanting to have something that doesn't particularly do much and isn't very gamified. In the real world, having fish is not really a game. It's frankly just a hassle and a chore. On top of which, you can see, while this claims to be free to play, there's $15 of DLC here, which is quite a lot. Here we have a game called Master Boy, which looks Chinese, and boy is that a poor localization / translation here. Yep, it looks like it's trying to be something like a Minecraft / Pokemon game. For 99 cents, that's way too cheap. Seems also to be themed around food and cuisine, which doesn't make a ton of sense when you see these monsters running around. And then you call it Master Boy, and then there's a female character taking up side billing in the thumbnail, and then it comes off as somewhat sexist. And the Chinese are particularly well known for being fairly dismissive of their females. So I wanted to end on a loss, and I think the game has granted me said loss. And I think that leaves me with a fine situation here where We could try to duel in solo mode if we wanted to, or we could just focus on finishing the stream, and it makes a lot more sense to focus finishing the stream, considering we've been going 3 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, I haven't been collecting any of these upgrades or these unlocks up until this point, which that once again I think just highlights how I've forgotten how the dual pass even works, because I've spent so much time at level 100. So 72 days to get the remaining 100 up to 100. We're at 13 now. The odds seem very high that will happen. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Loyal Size Cube, which looks like nothing. That's English and Japanese. Here we have one Morasame. Looks like it might be Japanese only as an JRPG. Looks like there might be a little bit of adult content in it. $11.89 Japanese only. Let's see if there's any adult warning content. Not really. So oddly though, that is like the only even Japanese anime-esque visuals we've seen today that I remember. We have something called Minesweeper, which is arguably a better twist on Minesweeper, it looks like, but it seems like it has other gameplay mechanics on top of that. So it isn't just doing Minesweeper. It seems like you use Minesweeper to explore the map, then you collect monsters to strengthen your team and defeat the boss. That seems like 3 different gameplay mechanics. English and Chinese. I would have to assume English here is going to be rough, but I'm going to make an exception and follow it anyways. Like, this really is a smart move. Take some simple gameplay mechanic everybody's familiar with, like Minesweeper, put on top of that more features like you would see in an RPG game where people are still somewhat familiar with that gameplay mechanic, and you've just mixed your peanut butter and your chocolate enough that at least your game stands out in the crowd. Here we have a game called Zimblanity, which looks like another asset flip horror game. So, easily dismissed. Here we have something called Rote Squared, which looks like it's probably a rhythm game, free to play. Yeah. Doesn't look particularly that good. Here we have a game called Sacrosanct, which looks like it's a hand-drawn, mostly text visual novel with just the same background image. And it's not a terrible background image. If you wanted to put it online and just show off the picture, that's fine, but it seems often fairly ridiculous when they try to throw single bits of art or single short stories or even somewhat long stories in visual novel format. It's really hard to say yes to this one, so I'm not going to. We have something called Royal Riddles, which is just a Pictocross game. We haven't seen a ton of Pictocross games lately, English and Russian. We also never heard of anything from Valve as far as we're not doing business with Russian companies anymore. Like, they may have said something along that lines, but we're still seeing plenty of games that support the Russian language, which I assume means that some Russian business was involved at some point. Pirate Solitaire here is yet another solitaire game. I would really like to learn where the limitations are coming from as far as solitaire games, because you'd almost expect there to be 5 to 10 that were released every week, and yet it seems like that's not the case. It might be a case that 8th Floor, as a publisher, is the only people actually publishing solitaire games, and nobody else is funding even the low amount of development it would take to make a solitaire game. And so that might be the limiting factor. If Big Fish Games, for instance, were the only people making hidden object games, and it was fairly difficult to get the funding or otherwise make a hidden object game, we probably would only see one hidden object game every couple of weeks. Also, unfortunately, it's pretty easy to make a hidden object game. This Astro Force game does not look like anything of interest. Here we have something called a Slit of Joy, which looks like it's a pretty dark psychological horror game with some RPG Maker elements. $2.29 English only. I'm gonna put this on the follow list just to see if people like it. See if this guy's made anything else. Nope. Here we have a jigsaw puzzle game. It also is coming from 8th Floor. So 8th Floor is sort of somewhat flooding Steam with some pretty low quality games. I wouldn't 100% just describe it as low effort, but they're not getting particularly ambitious with jigsaw puzzle and solitaire games. VR Solar System Traveler. It looks pretty visually polished, but not quite good enough. And as a VR game, it is way too cheap, so I would just suspect there's not a lot there. Apparently, we are having a publisher sale. Rydo, or Ed-0 Zombie Uprising. Interesting. This looks like one of those Japanese games that aren't at the top of the quality, but can sometimes be interesting. So I'll put this on the follow list. I think this is a brand new game, even though it kind of looks like it would be from the mid-90s. A zombie uprising in the Edo period is a slightly different twist. Yeah, D3 I guess is the publisher of Onichambra also. So if I had extra money, now would be the time in which I would definitely get Onichambra Origin, even though I don't think the game is actually particularly that well reviewed. And I might even consider something like Omega Life Labyrinth, but some of these other games, these are these more single A or indie, even Japanese games. Yeah, getting the Onichambra series while it's cheap is really about the only time when it makes sense to get the series. You can see like Zombie Girl, Schoolgirl and Zombie Hunter, for instance, is at $9.99 with mixed reviews. Is fine, but at its original price of $40, it's ridiculously overpriced. Like these literally are games that they were calling poop games, or they were calling them shit games in Japanese. Like they knew from the beginning that the Onichambra series was going to be not something that sold a lot, so they weren't putting a lot of effort into it. And then instead they were making a lot of games. Now, eventually Onichambra became popular enough that Onichambra Origin is now received as mostly positive, and even Z2 Chaos is mostly positive. The really bad Onichambra games aren't even available on Steam or on PC. See if there's anything else that really jumps out. There's a lot of visual novels here that I've either not considered or I considered them and got rid of them. It's not particularly common to have Japanese publishers have sales at all. So that's frankly a little surprising. If we were to just go to the front page of Steam, no big amount of sales are really happening right now. It is very much standard Steam stuff. It does seem like they've started fairly quickly giving out the Tiny Tina's Wonderland shift codes, but they've changed how that works so that you can't redeem those shift codes unless you actually own the game, which is a little weird because it seems like you could have redeemed any of the other previous Borderlands games without actually owning it. Of course, redeeming those gold keys and whatever else the shift codes would give you without owning the game doesn't actually give you anything. It just gives you this nice payout when you finally do get around to playing the game or buying the game. But yeah, having just double checked and looked at the front of the Steam page, Steam store, it doesn't feel like a lot's going on right now. A lot of games are coming out. Let's see. Here we have one called Folding Maze, which there might be something interesting around that idea. But I think it would be fairly played out fairly quickly. I think you take this general concept and then you wrap some real visuals around it, and you don't just have it be piece of paper folding. You have it as a magic portal system that you're manipulating, and make it really look very polished and very good looking. Let's see. Heir Apparent. Looks like it's probably a visual novel game. But maybe not. It might be more of a social manipulation game. They're calling it a dialogue-based role-playing game. It's English only, allegedly full audio. It's free, so I guess check it out if you're interested. We have about 10 more tabs of new games. Armored Firestorm here. It looks uninteresting, so immediately dismiss that. Lucky Thalawar Zombie Rampage looks like garbage, even if it would load. It's free to play, single player only. This was not happening before as far as the delay in loading. I think it happens depending on what DNS crypt server I use. Depending on whether the DNS is moving fast enough. Outlander. Speaking of the internet, apparently there might be a new picture file format that people would embrace, like compared to JPEGs and PNGs. It's called OUI, and a programmer has quickly whipped up something to show that PNGs could be compressed and decompressed a lot faster for maybe even less space in a lot of cases. It would be a matter of just, I suppose, Google or Mozilla embracing support for a new video image format and trying to figure out if somebody has patents around the new picture format. The PNG format is pretty old, and JPEG is pretty old. So something that was faster, took up less space, would be good. I could see potentially this Outlander game that's not going anywhere, by the way. I could see also just trying to push everybody into vector-based graphics always. It would be hard in a lot of cases to convert the existing images into vector-based graphics. But if you were going to make an Internet 2.0 supporting only vector-based graphics and scaling would be the next step, certainly. If not scaling, then automatic resizing or thumbnailing would be nice. You would probably be shocked on how much time and effort is spent squeezing down a big image down to a 40 by 40 pixel thumbnail. This game, Koro e Tsubasa, looks like it's just a visual novel that maybe is good enough. Probably isn't. Fall list, but then a deluxe edition. It's free to play, deluxe edition, $4.49, English only. I suppose since it's free to play, though, I don't need to put it on the following list. I can just say check it out now if you're interested in it. You have a game called Shellout Showdown, which I don't think is my type of game. It looks like it's a player versus player focus. $7.19, English and Japanese. Here we have an RPG Maker type game. Or it doesn't even look like RPG Maker. It looks like an NES RPG called Nightblade. Nothing there. Here we have a game called A Butterfly's Dream, which is a reference to a Zen tale. But really, it just looks like it's probably a butterfly flying around. Relaxing game with no goals or enemies based on a Zen tale for $1.19. Arguably, $1.19 is too expensive for a simulation that's just going to have you fly around as a butterfly. Visually, though, it's kind of nicely polished, so I'm going to make an exception. See if people are willing to pay that much. Next, we have Terror Shooter Apocalypse, which... Yep. Still looks like a first-person shooter. Still doesn't look particularly interesting, like so many other games. 875 ammo and one weapon. Boy, is that a... Why would you need 875 bits of ammo and only one gun? That tells me that weapon doesn't spawn, that ammo doesn't spawn, and weapons don't spawn. Which really just highlights that there's nothing there as a game. Penelope's Odyssey here. You play as a rat traveling. There might be something to this. Free to play, English only. Again, if it's free though, I might as well just tell people to check it out. Like, I pretty much have to say no to this or make a special exception, and I guess I'll make a special exception. This feels like this might also be a student's project. SAU Game Lab kind of feels like a school. Moving on to the GameDeveloper.com articles, we had already talked about Capcom increasing base salary of staff in Japan by 30%. We had already talked about the manga publisher Shueisha branching into game publishing. GameStop stock prices are skyrocketing again. I think in part they're skyrocketing again because they were talking about, or they did some kind of stock split, or they announced, GameStop announced an upcoming stock split, the first in 15 years. It would increase the number of purchasable shares from 300 million to 1 billion. So that's probably the real world market reason why the price is going up, besides just a bunch of Wall Street bet people joking around. They also announced a cryptocurrency based NFT market on the way. It does not really feel like, though, that GameStop has done anything to improve GameStops or improve their business model in any way that people should be happy about. We had kind of talked about Activision Blizzard dropping a vaccine mandate. Game developer phrases it that it was driving another walkout. Frankly, there's probably a good reason to have a walkout at Activision Blizzard every day of the week. The update to this is that they've relented and will allow subsidiary studios to set individual policies for vaccine mandates. I wouldn't be surprised if this isn't a case that Activision Blizzard is actively just trying to drive out employees and irritate employees. It's not as obvious, but one way to union bust is just to get rid of all your employees, get them all frustrated enough to leave the company completely and just try and harass people out of existence. It takes a special kind of determination to say, the way I'm being treated is awful, this job and its management is awful, we need a union, but I want to stay at this job and I like this job otherwise. Like, that but is the hard thing to stay committed to. I've often said that if you enter a job and you find out that there's a union or talk of a union, you're immediately being told that there is either in the past or currently been so much conflict and so much bad management that a union was necessary, and so the work environment is going to be oddly more adversarial and oddly more hostile, and you might just do better turning around and leaving instead of sticking to a job that has a union, because it is effectively a red flag that there are problems in a business. Nobody goes through the hassle of forming a union when the management is bending over backwards to treat its employees nice and pay them well. And there's always the chance that a union in one job is pretty bad and not really improving anything and possibly making things even worse. Depending on who's in charge of the union and what they're really focused on and what they're doing. Here is the article I was talking about from GameDeveloper.com. Sony will keep acquiring game studios to sustain, quote, a virtuous cycle of success, which is a weird way to phrase things, and maybe GameDeveloper.com is phrasing it that way more than Jim Ryan is, because the only quote there that's let's see. Yeah. The full quote here is, Ryan suggested the company's proactive approach to mergers and acquisitions, that's what M stands for merger, will create a, quote, virtuous cycle where success begets success. Which is to say, yeah, he has no other way of making Sony succeed other than to acquire other people's success and acquire companies. Which, in a lot of ways, I think just admits that Jim Ryan does not know how to run Sony Interactive Entertainment. Like, he doesn't know how to run it. He doesn't know how to make it succeed. And if anything, this might be a prime example of somebody being allowed to be in charge when they're not qualified to be in charge. They're not skilled enough to be in charge. And yet, there's kind of no way to get rid of them either, unless parent company of Sony gets rid of him, or the shareholders get rid of him. He is embedded as the CEO. Anyways, moving on, we had already kind of talked about this. Wargaming to shut down businesses in Russia and Belarus. And that's the final one. Here we have some fall list cleanups games. Rain on Your Parade was rated very positively, so we can put that on the wish list. Reign of Arrows came out May 26, 2021. It's been about a year. It's a VR game. I'll give it another 6 months to a year, but then probably has to get removed because nobody's ever played it. VR is still just not adopted enough. Hex Grid puzzle game with railroads, Railway Islands. It's rated very positively, so we can put that on the wish list. Railroads Online is very positive. Now, I don't actually expect myself to play a whole bunch of railroad train games. This one came out October 2021. It's still in early access, so I'll give it some more time. But I probably will end up playing one. That being said, a lot of these railroad games with railroad in the name and not railway seem to be more puzzles and things like that. This again has 30 reviews and rated very positively, so it meets the requirements to be on the wish list. Ragnarok Chess. I'm still looking for one good chess, ideally a battle chess game. This is from 2021, has 19 reviews. I'll give it more time. Raft. Raft is still not out of early access. I would like to see Raft leave early access at this point. There's no reason for it to be labeled as early access. Minecraft, if it was on Steam, I don't think would label itself as early access. Just add that last bit of content that ends the story and call it a day. And then you can continuously add more items and more content, add more bosses. But yeah, effectively I think Minecraft considered itself out of early access once it had the end and the dragon in it. Since the dragon and the end has been added, they have updated the end to have the floating ships and more islands. They've added at least 2 or 3 bosses that are frankly stronger and more difficult to deal with and spawn than the dragon, and had no real problem with that. They've added a ton of features and code. Radio Telegraphist. I'm gonna leave this on the fall list. this is probably too weird of a game that it would ever actually have 30 reviews. It's a Morse code puzzle game, I guess is what you call. This Rydo Viscera, visually it looks pretty great, but must just play pretty terribly. $19.99 single player. You can see only 63% of people like it, and it only has 11 user reviews from July, so that can leave the fall list. Radio the Universe looks interesting, but it doesn't even have a release date. When did this get listed? I think a game like this has to leave the fall list just because this may never get released. This may have been announced and abandoned before it even had a release date. So yeah, that's gotta go. And then Radio Commander seems like a interesting troop movement simulation game. It may not be something I really would want to play, but it does meet the requirement, so I'll put it on the wish list. And so then that would be everything I kind of need to do today, I think. So let me just reload my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news. Then we could call it a day. See, Epic Games Store has added achievements. Interesting. Who acquired Daedalic Entertainment? I know they got acquired. I can't remember who though. Apparently it's the 99th birthday of Warner Brothers, or Looney Tunes. I guess Looney Tunes. Which, yeah. It's kind of shocking how old Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes really is. Although I guess it would be also kind of shocking to see how much the Looney Tunes have kind of failed to maintain relevance, whereas Donald, the Disney characters, the Mickey Mouse characters, are as old, if not older, and they have been shoved down the throats of people. There is apparently a season 3 of The Witcher in development. I didn't hear that announcement that third season had been greenlit, but whatever. I haven't even gotten around to watching the second season of The Witcher Netflix series. I don't know if it particularly even has that much to do with The Witcher game, so it's not very video game related. So yeah, the Epic Games Store has a My Achievements update that's now live, which really is about two years too late. Rating and polls are also coming soon, so They will, if ratings and polls are happening, then the Epic Store is pretty quickly going to be exactly like Steam. And the claim was that the Epic Store wasn't ever going to have reviews, so there couldn't be review bombings. Also, a notification center is coming soon. So, yeah. Not only are they slow to copy Steam, they are now going back on their own word. Here we have Sakura Succubus 5 being announced. So we do have something on this Monday that is somewhat lewd, but again, I think the Sakura series doesn't really get that explicit. This game contains scenes that some viewers might consider not safe for work. Yeah. That's hardly being tagged with sexual content. That's hardly saying there's actual nudity. The Sakura series has always been a lot of anime girls in scantily clad outfits and a lot more lewdness over actual explicit content. And then GameDeveloper.com also has an article that Epic Games has a new app for capturing photogrammetry assets on your phone. So you can scan your favorite coffee mug into a game in beta. This is probably a lot more for using in developing a game in the Unreal Engine than it is for just the end user, the game player, to potentially scan their coffee mugs into pre-existing games. Alright, well, we're dangerously getting close to 4 hours, so that's going to be it for this stream. Ironically, about 5 minutes from now, I'm going to have to spectate another game, but I'll do that off screen. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.